Hi, class, and welcome to chapter 18, which is on blood. We're going to be entering into the circulatory system, and we'll first talk about blood, which travels within the circulatory system. We divide your circulatory system into the cardiovascular system, which is your heart, arteries, and veins, and the lymphatic system. And blood is the transport medium for all nutrients, signaling molecules, respiratory gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide, and waste products. So your blood circulation is powered by the pumping action of the heart, which we'll talk about in the next chapter. Oxygen and nutrients diffuse across capillary walls to body tissues. Blood will transport hormones from endocrine glands, convey cells of the immune system, and also regulate body temperature. Males and females have a little different blood volume. Females have a little less blood volume. The blood has cellular and liquid components to it. It's a specialized connective tissue, as we learned about in chapter 4. The blood cells are what we call the formed elements. So those will be your platelets, erythrocytes, and leukocytes. And the plasma is the liquid portion of the blood. The hematocrit is the percentage of the blood volume that consists of red blood cells. And again, males and females differ just slightly in what their hematocrit looks like. The buffy coat is a portion of blood composed of leukocytes, which are white blood cells and platelets, and it's present at the junction of plasma and red blood cells. And what I mean by that is if we take a blood sample out of someone's arm and then centrifuge it down, so spin it very quickly, we get these major components of blood. So the plasma is the lightest. It will float to the top, and you should kind of know the basics of what the order of this blood sample will be like as in terms of weight. So the plasma is the lightest, it will float to the top. It's the least dense, it makes up about 55% of whole blood, and most of plasma is water. Then the buffy coat is made up of all the leukocytes and platelets, and the leukocytes are all the white blood cells, so those involved with the immune response. And the erythrocytes are the most dense, so they'll float to the bottom, and erythrocytes, also known as the hematocrit, are all of the red blood cells. So plasma is at the top. It's straw-colored, sticky. It's about 90% of water, but it contains a lot of other molecules, ions, nutrients, wastes, and proteins. These are the three main proteins in blood plasma. I won't ask you guys too many questions about those. And then the formed elements, again, are erythrocytes, leukocytes, and platelets. The staining of blood cells can be an acidic or basic. So we might see a pink or a blue and purple stain. So here is a very kind of basic blood smear stain. You have most of these are erythrocytes, and you'll see they don't have nucleuses in them. Everything you see that has kind of a purplish darker stain to it is a type of leukocyte. And there's 5 different types of leukocytes in the blood, and you should know the different types and what they all look like. I'm going to just bring your attention to neutrophils. This is the most common of the leukocytes, and it looks like that. And then if you see like little tiny dots, these are platelets, which help in blood clotting. So these are all blood cells known as the formed elements of blood. So red blood cells are oxygen transporting cells. They're the most numerous of the formed elements. They have no organelles or nuclei, and they are the ideal measuring tool for estimating the sizes of nearby structures. They are packed with oxygen-carrying proteins called hemoglobins, and hemoglobins are just what will carry oxygen in the blood. And they don't have a nucleus or organelles because they're packed with hemoglobin to carry as much oxygen as possible to give the greatest surface area. So your red blood cells will pick up oxygen in the lungs and then release oxygen to tissues. Their structural characteristics contribute to their respiratory function, and this is important to know. Their biconcave shape gives them about 30% more surface area, so the ability to have oxygen and carbon dioxide diffuse across their surface. They're made up of 97% hemoglobin, which is the protein that carries oxygen, and they lack mitochondria because mitochondria is what creates ATP, and normally mitochondria needs oxygen. But you don't want mitochondria in your red blood cells because then your red blood cells will consume all the oxygen that they pick up. So red blood cells do not have mitochondria so that they will not consume the oxygen they pick up. And here's the structure of an erythrocyte. Leukocytes are the white blood cells. They protect the body from infectious microorganisms. They function outside of the bloodstream in loose connective tissue. And diapedesis is this idea of circulating leukocytes when they leave the capillaries, and they will originate in the bone marrow. You have two types of leukocytes, granulocytes and agranulocytes. We have a mnemonic device to help you learn both. It can also help you remember the relative abundance of leukocytes because they're from the most abundant to the least abundant. So neutrophils are the most abundant of the leukocytes. That might be a test question. And basophils are the least abundant of the leukocytes. Here's the relative percentages of the different types of leukocytes. You can see neutrophils are at the top, with basophils at the bottom because those are the least numerous. The neutrophils are the most numerous. Their nucleus has 2 to 6 lobes in it. They phagocytize and destroy bacteria, and this is what a neutrophil looks like. Again, make sure you know what that one looks like. Eosinophils is about 1 to 4%. It plays a role in ending allergic reactions by phagocytizing allergens, and it will secrete enzymes that degrade histamines. This is what an eosinophil looks like. Basophils, these ones are the least numerous. They are similar in function to mast cells, so they'll function in an inflammation mediation for allergies and parasitic infections, as shown there. And then here are the agranulocytes. So you notice the pictures before kind of had these little dark staining pieces. Those are called granules. And now we'll get to the agranulocytes. The lymphocytes comprise about 20 to 45%. They act at a specific foreign molecule or an antigen. So here's a lymphocyte. And the big thing about lymphocytes is that they have T and B cells, which will produce antibodies. And this might be a test question. The lymphocytes are the specific type of leukocyte that creates antibodies. And antibodies are important for marking anything foreign as destruction. Monocytes compose 4 to 8%. These are the largest of the leukocytes. The nucleus is kidney-shaped. They will transform into macrophages to also phagocytize cells or engulf them. And this is what a leukocyte looks like. Platelets are cell fragments, and they help to function in the clotting of your blood in injury. And again, here's a great kind of summary of the elements of the blood, which serve you well just to kind of go through and study briefly. Hematopoiesis, this might be a test question. This is the process by which blood cells are formed, and about 100 billion new blood cells are formed each day. Bone marrow is located within all bones. In the red marrow, this is active, where actively generation of new blood cells is made. We have immature erythrocytes. In adults, red marrow is located between the trabeculae of the spongy bone and the axial skeleton. Yellow marrow is more dormant, and it contains mainly fat cells. So this is the bone marrow and kind of what it looks like, but I won't ask you too many other questions about that. But here's what the red bone marrow looks like, and just how our red blood cells are formed in red bone marrow. Cell lines and blood cell formation. So pretty much this is just saying that all blood cells originate in your bone marrow, and they all originated from one cell type called a hematopoietic blood stem cell. And this hematopoietic blood stem cell will eventually split into every specific type of blood cell that we have. And other than that, you don't need to know that, but it's just kind of cool to see you have one hematopoietic stem cell, and it will differentiate into all the different red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets in the blood. Disorders of blood, you can have polycythemia, which is an abnormal excess of erythrocytes. Anemia is when your erythrocyte levels or hemoglobin concentrations are low, so you have less oxygen being delivered to tissues. Sickle cell disease is an inherited condition which results from a defective hemoglobin molecule, and the erythrocytes will distort into a sickle shape. Leukemia is a form of cancer, and disorders of platelets are thrombocytopenia, which is an abnormally low concentration of platelets, which would be bad in people who are trying to clot their blood. Blood stages throughout life. First, blood cells will develop with the earliest blood vessels. Late in month 2, the liver and spleen take over blood formation, and then bone marrow becomes the major hematopoietic organ or blood cell formation by month 7. And that's all you need to know for blood. And thanks for listening, guys.